Hello, this is Judge Naftel, presiding probate judge and chief election official for Jefferson County. I'm going to be walking you through this PowerPoint presentation for our Chief Inspector School and poll worker training. Your election materials will be delivered to you in these red cages. Every precinct will get one. Unlike past years, chief inspectors will not pick up poll pads after training, and there's nothing else to be picked up. Everything will be in this cage, even the keys for the voting machines, okay? There will be a padlock on this, and you will receive instructions for the combination to unlock this cage at poll worker training or chief inspector training, as the case may be. Be sure to check the contents of your cages before Election Day to make sure you have everything. But if you're missing something, don't panic. Just call the Election Center, the help desk, and we will get you what you need, okay? All right, get to your precinct early. Don't wait until 6:30. When you get there, make sure your iPhone that is provided is turned on and charged. Turn on all of your DS200 machines, and you'll see references throughout this to the election manual pages for doing that. Turn on your express vote. Now, even though you may not have anyone use the express vote, but once or twice the whole day, you still need to have that turned on and enabled and up and running. Go ahead and run your zero tapes on all your voting machines to show that no ballots have been counted. If you have multiple poll pads, set them all up. Even if you think the turnout's not going to be very high, go ahead and turn on all your poll pads, get them set up. Make sure your tables, your voting booths, and all of that are set up in your room the way you want them for most efficient flow. Power strips, extension cords are in your supply cage. Go ahead and mark off your 30-foot distance from the door of the building so that no one can campaign within that perimeter, and there are no news media or anyone who's not voting or a poll watcher or a poll worker inside. If you look on pages 25 and 26 of the 2022 election manual, you'll see a complete list for start. Now, most of the numbered envelopes that you'll be returning, most of the signs that you'll be taping up to the walls, additional instructions and other paper materials are going to be inside the brown cardboard record of election box that is in the red cage delivered to your precinct. Okay. The exceptions to that are that the ballot pads are going to be separately put into the red cage, and envelope 1A, which goes to the Board of Registrars and is returned in the clear plastic bag. That would normally be in the record of election box, but for this primary only, it's going to be just added to your red cage. So it's not going to be in the record of election box, but it will just be in the cage. All right, once you open your record of election box, this is the first envelope that you'll see. See where it says before polls open? That's your hint to open this one first. It has got all of these signs to be taped up throughout the precinct, including instructions, photo ID required, how to deal with provisional balloting, how to ask for voting assistance, and the like, okay? It's got all of this stuff, voting instructions, things that you're not allowed to do in the precinct, your rights as a voter. It's got the spoiled ballot envelope. It's got the pink voter complaint pad. It's got the record of voters' change of residence or death. It's got the voter update registration form that goes to the registrar. It's got name tags for clerks, for inspectors, and for watchers. It's got basically all the stuff that they're going to fill out that's not a ballot. Loose inside the record of election box, so not in that envelope, you'll find the paper for all of the poll watchers to sign in and take their oath, and on the front of that for all of the poll workers to sign in and take their oath. And you'll see it's got the date, it's got the precinct, and all of that. You'll find some extra precinct identifying stickers should you need those. For example, if an envelope did not have one of these stickers on there that already identified your precinct. All right, other things that are loose in the box, this notice to voters to have their ID ready, and it's got a list of the valid forms of identification, which we'll go over later. A reminder to voters that this is a primary election and that you have to declare a party preference. You'll only receive a ballot for that political party. And then this crossover voting diagram that shows that if you vote Democrat in the primary, you can't vote Republican in the runoff, or vice versa. You can only vote in a runoff, which will be held in June, if you've voted in that party's primary. You'll also find a bunch of secrecy folders. You'll find the 2022 election manual. You'll find a pad for the express vote ballots, which are these little slips that you see on this slide. And then that turns into a printed ballot that you then run through the DS200 machine. So between this PowerPoint, that election manual that you see pictured here, and the other instructions that are inside your record of election box, you should have everything you need. We also have additional videos on the website, jeffcoprobatecourt.com, under the Elections tab, that will teach you how to do other things. All right, the electronic poll pads, this is just the new way of checking voters in. It doesn't record who a voter voted for. It doesn't record anything about their ballot. It just makes sure that they are registered to vote and that they're at the right precinct. Okay, so there's a separate video and manual on how to run these things. I'm not going to delve too much into that here. If you've worked a precinct before, you're probably familiar with these. These also print out a receipt that the voter then takes to the person who hands them the correct ballot. All right, so these ballot receipts then go into envelope BR1, which is returned at the end of the night in the record of election box. If a voter for some reason does not sign that poll pad, then you've got to educate them on what this thing is and why it's okay for them to sign it, that it doesn't record their vote or who they voted for. If a voter simply refuses to do that, then they must cast a provisional ballot. All right, these are the valid forms of voter ID. Remember that if it's an Alabama driver's license, it can be expired, but only if it's expired in the last 60 days, okay? These other forms of ID must be current. Otherwise, if the person does not have a valid ID, they have to vote provisional. The exception to that is that if two poll workers can positively identify that person without an ID, and they're on the poll pad as a registered voter, then those poll workers can fill out an affidavit that has to be returned, and then they can give that voter a regular ballot. That's going to be a very uncommon occurrence. All right, a booking sheet or a movement sheet from a county jail is a sufficient form of voter ID. You're not likely to see these, but this is an example of something you might see. All right, active versus inactive voters. If someone is on the poll pad as an inactive voter, that doesn't mean anything other than that they just haven't cast a ballot in the last couple of elections. So have that voter do a voter update form, select form completed, and then give them a regular ballot. You can check pages 22 and 23 of the election manual for further guidance. For the 2022 primary, we've got 115 different ballot styles, okay? If a voter asks why candidate Joe Smith or XYZ or office ABC is not on their ballot, it's because that person is not a candidate in that voter's precinct, or that office is not on the ballot in that voter's precinct. Now, we've just done redistricting based off the 2022 census, and the district lines have moved a little bit. So someone who may have voted for County Commission Seat 2 in past elections may now be voting for County Commission Seat 1 or something like that. And that may explain why their ballot doesn't have a name that they're used to seeing or an office that they're used to seeing. All right, poll worker expectations. Remember that you are a representative of the county, and while we expect our voters to conduct themselves in a civil manner, you have an even higher expectation. Courtesy, respect, and patience will go a long way. But this is a stressful day for a lot of people. They're having to take off work, so remember to treat our voters with an unusual amount of patience and grace. Please dress appropriately. No t-shirts with inappropriate slogans or pictures. No pajamas, ripped jeans, house slippers, things like that. During the day, do not post on social media about the precinct or about anything related to the election. For example, don't say, seeing lots of turnout for candidate XYZ, or not seeing many votes for so-and-so so far, which you wouldn't even know anyway. Don't issue endorsements. Don't make political statements while working. Don't update about the precinct live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anything like that. When you're inside the precinct or within 30 feet, don't discuss the election. Don't discuss politics. Don't discuss candidates, political parties. anything like that that can be construed by a voter as trying to sway or influence another voter. All right, common election day issues. Make sure you mark off your 30 feet so that campaign staff, media, exit poll staff, etc. know where the boundaries are. Campaign materials such as hats, t-shirts, buttons, they're fine for voters, but not for poll workers or poll watchers. Many voters will come in with a sample ballot, either printed or electronic, that's fine, but they cannot leave them inside the precinct. Ask if you see a voter coming in, ask them to leave with their sample ballot, but periodically, meaning every 10 minutes or so, go through the precinct, pick up any sample ballots that may have been left so that those don't become part of the election process for other voters. Cell phones, it's okay for voters to have, but they're not allowed to be in there openly discussing with someone else who to vote for, things like that. Write-in candidates we don't have in primaries. Voter IDs, make sure the name and face match. In the rare case where you have to invoke the time limit for voting, check page 12 of the election manual. This is going to be rare, but you may have someone who's just sitting there for 10 or 15 minutes trying to fill out their ballot, and there is a time limit for how long a voter can take. All right, photographs. Under the new law, a voter can take a selfie of his or her own ballot, but they can't take a photograph that would in any way reveal who else is in that precinct or what someone else's ballot may be. I'll refer you to this Attorney General opinion on firearms. Basically, if whatever the building's rules are, or whatever rule the voter has to abide by with respect to firearms. Voter requests for assistance. If a voter is inside the precinct, there is a process for them to name someone that can assist them in voting. You will want to update your poll list to a request to reflect that assistance was received. As you know, physically disabled voters or voters over the age of 70 may request to be moved to the front of the line, and others are required to accommodate that request. If a disabled voter can pull up to the precinct but cannot come inside, they may designate an individual to assist in that process by taking their voter ID inside, coming back out, bringing the ballot to them. They fill out the ballot and then return the ballot inside, feed it through the machine. Provisional ballots. Barry Stevenson goes over this in great detail at our schools in person. If you look at pages 31 to 34 of the election manual, you will see additional instructions on this. Basically, when do you have to vote provisional? Well, if you don't have a valid ID. If the voter has requested an absentee ballot and that shows up on the poll pad and the voter claims that either did not receive the ballot in time or did not send it in, then they will be allowed to vote provisional. And as long as a week after the election we're not showing that they got both an absentee ballot returned and the provisional ballot, then the provisional ballot will count. If they don't show up on the list of registered voters, but then thereafter they go verify with the registrar that they were a registered voter and things of that nature. Remember that some of these things can be resolved just by doing the voter update form. But the bottom line is, do not turn a person away from voting unless you're directing them to another precinct because they should be voting at that precinct and that person agrees to comply. Otherwise, always allow someone to vote provisional. It's critical, absolutely critical, that you make sure the provisional ballot materials are properly filled out. That PB2 provisional ballot envelope, it must have the voter's name clearly printed on the outside, because when the canvassing board meets a week after the election to review all of the provisional ballots, if we can't match that to a recommendation from the Board of Registrar, then that ballot will be rejected. So it must have the voter's name on the outside. It doesn't show us the ballot, doesn't tell us who they voted for. It just shows the name of the voter that cast that provisional ballot so that we can match it up with our records. Spoiled ballots. Occasionally someone will accidentally mismark a ballot or mark the wrong candidate, and they will come to you and ask for a new ballot, which is fine. You can give them one, but take that spoiled ballot and deal with it immediately. Tear the corner off, put it in the spoiled ballot envelope. Don't set it aside to do later. We had some complaints in 2020 about people poll workers inadvertently recirculating spoiled ballots. We don't want to have those again. All right, poll watchers. For a primary, candidates appoint the poll watchers, and only one watcher per precinct per candidate is allowed. They are not allowed to interfere or hinder with the election process, but in general, they're allowed to stand around. You can't just shuffle them off to a corner and say, you can only watch here. Remember, they're not allowed to interfere with you, but they can stand and observe what's going on, okay? They can ask questions, but they can't interfere. They can leave and come back, make sure they've got their letter so that you know who they are. They can't physically inspect election documents such as the poll pad or voters list. They can't inspect anyone's ballot. They can't take pictures inside. They can't wear candidate apparel, buttons, hats. They can't make calls. If they want to talk to a voter, they have to go outside that 30-foot perimeter. There's a guideline sheet in your materials for what poll watchers can and can't do. And if you just politely remind them, 99% of the time, they are happy to comply. A few more things to be mindful of. No news media inside the precinct. If you're approached by a member of the media for comment, just refer them to my office. Walk your precincts throughout the day, collect any unattended sample ballots, trash, campaign material, but it's good to do that every 10 minutes just to make sure none of that stuff accumulates. If you see a voter who appears to be confused or lost, step in and offer direction. Allow the voter to feed his or her own ballot into the machine, unless they ask you to do it. As the voters are coming through the line and going past the poll pads, check and double check the ballot style on their receipt to make sure that you are handing them the correct ballot, okay? If you're a poll worker, work with your chief inspector. Normally they have a lot of experience and they have a lot of wisdom to bring to bear. All right, closing time. So 7 p.m. comes around and you have been there since 6 o'clock, so 13 hours later. If there are any voters in line at 7, they are allowed to vote. Don't start shutting down your precinct until after 7 p.m. and after every voter in line at 7 has voted and you've completed this shutdown process that we're about to go through, okay? If it's 6:55, no one's in line, you don't see any cars out on the parking lot, and you think, well, I'm going to go ahead and get a jump start on it, resist that temptation, wait until 7 p.m. If you have voters in line at 7 and they're stretching out your door, if possible, go ahead and pull them inside the precinct, secure the door so that you know exactly where that line ends. I would designate a poll worker to coordinate closing the polls. The elections return checklist is your best reference for where your material should go. You'll see a photograph of that later. That is inside your box. Look at the election manual, pages 26 and 27, and pages 49 to 54 for further guidance on how to close your precinct. Now, you're going to be exhausted, but this has to be done correctly to save time, make sure we get timely results of the election, and to make sure that we are simply above reproach on returning our results. Okay, after the polls close. This procedure is going to seem complex, but it's just a series of simple steps that you follow one after the other. First, you close down your DS200s after every voter has voted. That procedure is on 39 to 41. Basically, open that door with the key, the access panel, initiate the shutdown process by pressing close poll. That will print results from that machine. Press finished and then turn off to shut down. When the power button inside the access door has gone green, then red, then off, then and only then do you pull all the memory cards from the voting machines and put them in envelope 10. Then and only then do you remove all the ballots from the voting machines and place them in the black zippered voted ballot bag. You finish that shutdown and you put the keys to the voting machines in envelope 11. All right, the printouts from the voting machines. You put one copy of those results in, well, envelope 5 is for your zero tapes, envelope 6, envelope 7CA, that's for the canvassing board, envelope 7D, that's for the Democratic Party, envelope 7R, that's for the Republican Party. You put one in envelope 8, one in envelope 10, you post one copy on the door of the precinct. So the machines should print out a sufficient number of these results for you to tear off one and put one in each of these envelopes. All right. Just like there was an envelope that said supplies to be used before polls open, there's another one that says supplies to be used after polls close. And this is a photograph of everything that's inside that envelope. You'll see the different numbered envelopes that go different places. Judge of probate, envelope 6, envelope 7CA, 7D, 7R, 8, 10, 11, 12. All of those have instructions for what goes in them and where you put them after you've placed materials inside of them, okay? All right, your BR1, that's where all your ballot receipts go, and this is a blow up. See how it says after polls close, place in record of election box. That means don't put it back in the cage, don't put it in the clear envelope, put it in the record of election box. All right, the voting machines have a public and private count. Don't worry about the private count. The public count is the total for the day. Complete your ballot accounting certificate and place that in envelope 5. Refer to pages 28 to 30 of the election manual for how to complete that. You'll see a photograph of that in a moment. Express vote machine shut down. Follow the procedure on page 48 for shutting that down. The poll pads, you don't have to turn them off, just put them back in their cases. Put your Wi-Fi unit, the charger, and the iPhone back in the case. Make sure that everyone signs the payroll voucher and places it in envelope 5. Make sure that does not go in the record of election box or back in your cage. All right, this is a photograph of the ballot accounting certificate. It's fairly self-explanatory. It's just a way to double check that the number of ballots used during the day matches the number of ballots run through the voting machines. It doesn't record who voted for whom or anything like that. Okay, it's also got the total number of spoiled ballots, the total number of voters from the electronic poll pads, total number of votes that are provisional, so that you have a record of every vote and every ballot in your precinct for that day. What goes where when closing? In your clear bag, it used to be a white bag, now it's just a clear plastic bag that comes inside the record of election box that you'll open when you first get there. Envelope 1A, which is the voter update forms that go to the registrar, that goes in the clear bag. Envelope PB4 that has all the provisional roster, the PB3, the voter re-identification forms, not the provisional ballots, but just the other stuff that goes in the PB4, okay? Envelope 5 that has the zero tapes, the payroll voucher, the ballot accounting sheet. Envelopes 7CA, 7D, 7R. Envelope 8, the news media. Envelope 10, the voting machine memory sticks. Envelope 11, voting machine keys. In the record of election box, you put envelope 6, the spoiled ballot envelope, envelope BR1 for ballot receipts, all voted ballot stubs, all partial ballot pads. Remember, you never put voted ballots, memory sticks, or provisional ballots in your record of election box. This is a photograph of the front and back of your election returns worksheet. This has been updated, and this is a great guideline for you to follow in terms of what goes where. Okay, it's got photographs of the current envelopes, and so this will be your best guide. These record of election stickers. You may have a couple of these inside your box. You only need to use one of these, and it only goes to seal the record of election box once everything is in there that is supposed to be in there. Don't use it for anything else. All right, the black canvas voted ballot bag. All ballots from your DS200s and your express vote machine go in the black canvas voted bag. Okay, DS200 voted ballots should not go anywhere else but the black bag. Orange provisional ballot bag. Only the PB2 envelopes with the PB1 envelopes that have the provisional ballots inside of them go in this orange provisional ballot bag. Only provisional ballots go in the orange bag. And when I say express vote machine ballots go in the black canvas voted ballot bag, you don't actually get a ballot, you don't feed a ballot through the express vote machine, you feed that into the DS200. That's what your voted ballot bag looks like. That's where all your voted ballots go. Your orange provisional ballot bag should not look like this. It should look like that bag without it being taped up in any way. In the red cage, put your extension cords, your power strips, any signage, things like that, not the metal voted here signs, but any other signage any full pads of unused ballots. No numbered envelopes go in the red cage except for envelope 12, just because that's extra stuff that we don't need either in the record of election box or in the clear plastic bag. However, if you put that envelope 12 in the clear plastic bag, it's okay. These are the things that must leave the precinct with you. The voted ballot bag, that black bag, the clear plastic bag with all those correct numbered envelopes, the orange provisional ballot bag, the poll pads with the cases, the record of election box with all the materials that go in there that we covered earlier that has been sealed with that long sticker, and the case with the iPhone, the chargers, and the Wi-Fi unit. If any of those are left, then you're going to have to go back to the precinct and retrieve them. And we may have to get a court order if it's been locked up for the night. So don't leave your precinct if you're a chief inspector without having all those things with you. This envelope 12 is what I just referred to. You can put this in your supply cage, but frankly, if you put it in the clear plastic bag, that's okay too. When in doubt as to where an envelope goes, read the envelope. The brown envelopes go in the record of election box. The white envelopes go in the clear plastic bag. Make sure you have everything before you let that precinct door lock behind you. If you're missing something that needs to be returned, you're responsible as the chief inspector for going back and getting it. As you know, if you've worked before, there are 5 different locations to return your election materials to. Back in the old days when training was conducted all over the county, you just returned to the location where you were training. If you're an old chief inspector, you know where to go. We have a downtown Birmingham return location that's in the alley behind the Criminal Justice Center. Homewood, we used to use the public library. We now use Trinity United Methodist. So you won't return on Oxmoor, but on the street behind Trinity United Methodist, the satellite courthouse in Centerpoint, the Bessemer Sheriff's Office, or the Gardendale Civic Center. If you're a chief inspector and you're not sure where to go, we have a list and you can contact us and we'll tell you where to go. Finally, if you have any problems on election day, whether it's with a voter, a poll watcher, a machine malfunction, anything like that, call Election Day Support at 205-327-7326 and we will be more than happy to assist you. Thanks so much.